The battle that I've had in my mind and the dark thoughts that I've had, the suicidal ideations and wanting to take your own life is a very dark place. So getting into a ring and getting punched in the head, cool, like hit me as hard as you want, knock me out, but it's still not going to be as hard and dark as the battles that I've had to go through and overcome in my mind. So for me, it's like, that's what I love. I've been able to overcome something that nothing else will ever be as hard as.
That's Ryan Waite. He's a youth worker who spends most of his days sharing his life experience to help guide young men in a positive direction.
And that's what's motivated me to this day, is just to really not want anyone to ever feel what I felt.
Just 25, Ryan has survived more hardship than most. After his mother passed away when he was 11, Ryan's dad descended into alcoholism and became abusive, forcing Ryan to move out of home with his brother as a teen.
So when I was 14, my brother was 21, and I had to make the decision. I leave my family home with all the memories that I had with my mum.
Ryan battled with anxiety and depression, and even after finding a great psychologist, fell in with the wrong crowd and turned to drugs to avoid facing his emotions.
That lifestyle wasn't what I wanted to be like. I knew that there was something more to life.
In his early 20s, Ryan's dad died of cancer, and he felt so lost he planned on suicide. But fortunately, it wasn't to be the end.
So when my dad did pass away, everything sort of hit rock bottom for me, because just so many emotions. And then I had a lot of anger still as well from the past that I hadn't dealt with.
Throughout it all, Ryan has been living with ADHD, a condition he views as his superpower.
ADHD has a very common theme with all these people. We're creative, we're empathetic. We never talk about the positives. We're always focused on the negatives.
Now he's a Muay Thai fighting weapon and inspiration to many. With a heart of gold, he's deeply thankful is still beating.
I'm here for a purpose. I'm grateful for so many things that have come my way.
Welcome to Young Blood, an award-winning podcast on a mission to make the mental health of young men a top priority. My name's Callum McPherson, I'm a journalist, and this is our platform to open up and share stories of what we've been through, because we're not alone. Let's do it. Before we kick this off, I just want to say thanks so much to everyone who's taken 15 to 90 seconds out of their day to rate and review the show on Apple Podcasts. It boosts us up the ranks massively and makes a huge difference to how many people we can reach with these potentially life-saving stories. So thank you. And for those who haven't got around to it, please, if Young Blood has delivered you some value, let us know on there. Cheers, legends. Trigger warning, if you find anything spoken about in today's episode distressing, please contact Lifeline on 13 11 14. Ryan, what did you love about your mum?
What did I love about my mum? She had a smile, man. She had the most beautiful kind smile and heart. She had the most kind-hearted heart and smile. A smile that would light up a room wherever she was, man. Yeah.
And what sort of person was she for you and your brother and your father?
Oh, the rock, the one that kept us in line to be who we are now. If it wasn't for my mum, the values that she taught me from the early age that I'm able to now use in my life. My mum taught me everything, taught my brother everything, helped my dad through a lot as well.
And what did she teach you was important as a young boy? Kindness
and being polite, just treating people with respect. Genuinely, man, just being a good person, being kind to each and every person I come across as best as I can.
And did you imagine her always being there?
100%.
So how did she pass away?
So she passed away in 2007 from ovarian cancer. Just have to check the year then. It's been a while. It's been 12, 13 years.
And how long did that happen after she was diagnosed?
It was a 3-year period. So my mum actually got in remission for a year or so. No, it was a year. And then she had secondary cancer. Then the third came back. Then unfortunately that did take her life.
And you're only 11 when she died, I believe.
Correct, yeah.
So what was it like for you from 8 to 11 going through that? How much did you understand, like the implications?
Honestly, bro, straight out nothing. Because when I got told, it was my mum was getting an operation because she was an older woman. She had me when she was 41. They said that she had to go through menopause. I think that's what they call it. I could be saying it incorrectly. So they take the ovaries out, and I just thought it was a standard procedure for my mum. We were going to Queensland. It was the night before I found out actually that my mum was having an operation the following week. So I didn't really think too much of it, man. But then it was until when my mum started going through chemotherapy, she started losing her hair. She was in hospital more than she was at home. You're spending more time in hospital than you are at home visiting your mum. You start to build an image and you start to understand it a little bit more. I mean, I was still quite young and naive, but yeah, it's hard, man. You don't really understand it completely. Yeah.
Did you expect that things were going to get better and she was going to come home and it would all resolve?
100%, even to the day she passed away. So it was a period I was at school and my cousin picked me up. She took me to the hospital and they told me that my mum was going to pass away, unfortunately, within like 24 to 48 hours, and we should say our goodbyes. And I remember sitting at the hospital, it was in Sydney, Calvary Hospital, and on the stairs, just bawling my eyes out. I still remember it clearly now. And it was just like, fuck, like why? I shouldn't be, I'm 11 years old and I'm being told my mum's going to be taken away from me. And I just was, every emotion like you can think of, I was feeling angry, pissed off. And then, so I did say my goodbyes, and then a day went by, 2 days went by, 3 days went by, 4 days went by. And then I'm like, all right, like you told me 24 to 48 hours and she's still here. A week went by. My mum lasted 2 weeks. So by the time the 2 week came, I started to think, like you just said, man, like, is she coming home today? So I started to get a bit more hope. And then when it did happen, I was a bit taken off guard because I was like, oh shit, I had put in my head that she may be coming home. But the reality then did sink in, obviously. Yeah.
It made it even worse. And then
100%.
Trying to come to grips with the fact that your mum wasn't going to come back as such a young person. I mean, I don't think it matters when you lose a parent that you love, like it's always going to hurt for the rest of your life, but especially that young, dude, you must have had years there where it was a shock that, you know, she was still gone.
It's an interesting thing because I went from year 6, right? I lost my mum when I was in year 6. So many changes already in my life, moving schools, growing up as a young boy, trying to find myself, going through puberty. It's an interesting stage of my life as well, or any boy's life, any girl's life, anyone's life.
Yep.
So there were so many factors going on that I don't think I ever really dealt with it. Well, I never knew how to deal with it anyway. There's no, like grief and loss and death has never really been spoken about. It still isn't. And I love talking about it. I know it sounds a bit unique that I do, but I love talking about death because we have to talk about it to overcome it and go through it. And unfortunately I didn't. And for many years I just suppressed it. And during those years I did experience a lot and my mental health did take a big hit, but there was other factors going on as well. I wasn't just dealing with the loss of my mum. Unfortunately, my dad didn't deal well with the loss of my mum as well. So that impacted me quite a bit as well.
So what did her passing do to your family unit?
It changed everything, man. As death does to anyone's life, it's going to impact it. And unfortunately, it puts you on a path, but going through adversity can make you better. But how it impacted my family, my life. My dad was an alcoholic. I'm not ashamed to say that he was because that's how he dealt with it all the time, every day. And when my mum did pass away, that increased. And then he did leave his job, then in gambling and other things started to come out. Unfortunately, I had to move out of home. So when I was 14, my brother was 21 and I had to make the decision. I leave my family home with all the memories that I had with my mum, my dog, everything like this. I had a really beautiful childhood. Neighbors were amazing. I had to leave that to know that this is going to give me a better opportunity in my life, living with my brother. And also part of me was like, oh, sick. It's my 21-year-old brother. I can do what I want when I want.
Yep.
But it was still a really hard decision to make. And I did make that decision and I did move out with my brother. So, yeah.
And that childhood you had been ripped away from you and it was no fault of your own. I mean, there must have been a hell of a thing to go through to have all those memories fresh in your mind of when everything was going well and you're a happy family to then, you know, shit hit the fan and it just all imploded. And it must have been like, you know, what the fuck happened there? And it's just crazy in life though, how a few things like that happening beyond our control can totally derail multiple lives and you're just left to try and pick up the pieces with it. Just to go back, when you were living with your dad in those years following your mum's death, what was it like being around him? What kind of emotions did you feel?
It was quite hostile. It was quite abusive, not physically, but emotionally. My dad was an incredible man. Deep down, I know my dad loved my brother and I massively, but he had his own traumas as a child, as an adult, and experienced a loss of his wife. Not being able to cope and deal with his emotions, that impacts the people around him. And we've never been told as males or anyone really to understand our emotions. So I had a lot of anger towards my dad for many, many years during that period because I blamed him for why everything happened. And I don't blame him anymore. I just realized that was his reaction to what he was dealing with and how he dealt with it. He didn't know how to deal with it. So I have a lot more empathy towards the situation and understand why, because no one's perfect and I'm not perfect. Our parents aren't perfect. And yeah, I mean, understanding I'm going on a bit of a tangent here, bro. I'm ADHD sometimes.
No, you're right, man. Everything you're saying is on point.
Yeah.
But yeah, I totally relate to you in that regard, where you think of a parent when you're a kid as someone who's supposed to have all the answers and have it all figured out, and they keep you safe and make sure everything goes as it's supposed to go. And it's not till you're older that you start to realize they were just an adult growing up themselves, going through different stages and facing their own challenges whilst trying to have to put up a front like they had everything under control. And then when things go down, like what happened to your family, I guess, yeah, over time you can develop empathy for how painful that would have been and what that would have been like for your dad to go through that. But as a young kid, like, you can't see it from that angle. All you know is how you feel inside, and you have that resentment that your mum's gone and your dad's not coping and you've been left in this situation.
And on that, but anyone, not even a kid though, I think for me to come to terms with that though, it wasn't an easy process either. Like, I talk about it now, like, yeah, my dad's all G, but man, I had years of a lot of anger and a lot of my own journey that I had to understand and go through. And that was talking about it, understanding my loss and grief and accepting my loss and grief, and talking with a psychologist, doing things about my mental health and understanding my emotions so much better. Because unfortunately, like I said earlier, to get through the shit, you got to talk about the shit. Yeah. And it's uncomfortable, but you have to do it if you want to overcome that. Yeah, feel better, happy.
You got to face up to it. What did you do with that anger when you were so angry as a kid?
Honestly, I channeled it into sport. I mean, I loved baseball. I played baseball most of my life. I played different sport. I was quite an overweight kid up until the age of, when I moved out of home, actually, I was an overweight kid, because naturally when things are not going too well, you're going to eat unhealthily. It comes out in other areas of your life. So I started doing sport. I lost quite a bit of weight as a kid, and I was really good at running. I did a triathlon. But then I was working a lot. So living out of home, trying to pay bills, rent, whilst trying to go to school too. The energy, all my effort was put to that. And so my life was like, I was like an adult, but I call myself an underage adult, because I was. Yeah. And then a lot of people would come up to me like, oh, you're so mature for your age. But then they would treat me mature in certain aspects of my life, but then treat me like a kid in other areas.
Yep.
And I did make the mistake. I did make a lot of mistakes in my childhood and my teenage years, but you got to learn from your mistakes. And unfortunately, that's how I learned through life. I don't have a single degree to my name, but I've just created my own business. I'm doing some pretty cool shit. And yeah, so it just shows you that, like, your circumstances and what school doesn't mean anything. If you really want to set yourself, I know that you hear a cliche, if you set yourself to it, you genuinely can. We can learn whenever we want if we really set ourselves and set our minds to do it.
Did you recognize that you had anxiety and depression when you were around like 14, 15?
Yeah. Yeah. So my mental health journey in that aspect got to a point around 14, 15. My brother came home, found me bawling my eyes out, and he said to me, like, we finally spoke about what was going on. So I was taken to the doctors. That's when I started medication, and I was chucked on a mental health care plan. I did start to see a psychologist, but the first session, to be blunt, I hated it. And then I was like, nah, stuff this. They're all shit. I'm not going to talk to anyone.
Yeah. Like, pretty typical reaction.
Yeah. Like, I'm a man. Growing up in a male dominant environment, I went to an all boys school.
Yeah.
Talking about your emotions. Like, come on, man, that's unheard of back then.
Yeah.
So, but I did, I slowly started to understand it, but
Did you go back to the same psychologist or a different one?
No, I never did. I still have I actually had my psychologist this morning, but I see my psychologist weekly now. For me, it's just like going to the gym. It's exactly like, I know we hear that, but we service our minds, we service our cars before they break down. Why don't we service our minds?
Yeah, absolutely. How long did it take to find that psychologist then? How long have you been seeing them for?
A year now, consistently online through a psychology service called Listen. Honestly, great service. It's an Australian-based one. You can have, it's like, don't want to say Tinder, but like it is in a way. You've got choices for different psychologists. You get a little bit of a background on them, and it just makes you a bit more comfortable in your own comfort of your own home, chilling out. I have my puppy sit with me. Yeah. It's easy, and you get to talk to someone. I love it.
And have you found other psychologists that matched well with you in the past before this one?
Oh, definitely. I've had a few throughout. I couldn't even tell you how many psychologists that I've had.
Yep.
There are multiple different ones, but you just got to find the one that right fits. To me, it's like dating. The first one might go okay, but the second one might go, oh, shit. And then, or you're like, thank you, next. So it's just trialing it and I use that Ariana Grande saying it is, because it genuinely is like dating. And for me, once I took that approach, it was fun.
That's a tough part of finding a psychologist, is that I think people expect that they can just walk in and the first person that they meet, it's going to be the right one for them. But I'm pretty sure the average is sort of somewhere between 4 and 6 that people go and see before they find one that they really want to see consistently. So it can actually take a pretty long time to find someone who suits you. And obviously, if you're a bloke or a woman, but particularly a bloke, and you go and talk about stuff that you feel like you shouldn't talk about, and then you feel like you don't get the response you want or you don't have the connection, then the response is going to be to clam up and perhaps not share it again. And that's 100%. A big focus for psych practices now that I talk to, is not just getting men in, because more men are going in now to access services in the first place, which is a great thing, but actually retaining them as well, and trying to get that recidivism rate up.
100%.
Yeah.
I was fortunate. I facilitated a men's mental health growth room last year called the Banksia Project.
Yep. I've had, is it Jack on the podcast?
Oh, Jack Jones. Yeah, he's a legend. Yeah. I met him through Sydney University.
Yeah.
The uni there. So as he would have told you all about it, like when it's such a powerful thing when you've got a bunch of blokes from like all walks of life, but we're connecting through mental health and sharing what's going on in our lives. It was just such a beautiful thing to be a part of.
Yeah.
And that's what the world is moving towards now as well in the mental health, is that peer-led experience too. Peer support working, lived experience is coming up now more and more, because they're seeing that people's lived experiences are just as valuable as a degree.
Well, it's that crucial part of the puzzle. Like, both sides of it are important, but without actually putting faces to stories and having humanity to connect to, the facts and the research and the numbers don't really mean much. So both sides of those things are crucial, especially if we're talking about working with young people, young boys, and trying to get a message across. Someone like you who's got your story and is able to articulate it the way you do with that sort of confidence and passion, that's going to get through to them more than a textbook or something like that,
That's the thing I never learned in school, because they taught you what to learn. They don't really teach you how to learn. And school's a very systematic approach. They have one way of learning, and then they judge you off one test at the end of the 12 years or the 13 years. And then if you don't do well, it's like, you're fucked, really. You're no hope. But I mean, realistically, we've put such a pressure on these kids, and that impacts their mental health. And that's what it is, an issue in society now, is the pressure that we put on kids to tell them what they need to decide on their future at the age of 17, 18.
Yeah.
Like, I'm 25, and now it's taken me, in the last couple of years, I've really understood what I want and my purpose in life. Yeah. So
but how can you decide that before you know who you are and what your skills are and what the world looks like? Yeah, it's a tough one.
If the schools aren't allowing us to actually explore our skills too. So
yeah, and I think hopefully that's slowly starting to shift. Like, I've been doing some work with an entrepreneurial school here in Adelaide that teaches 9 courses outside of just your standard English, math, science. So I went and did a podcasting course with them, connect them to future industry, that sort of thing. So there are some schools starting to think all right, so what about the kids who don't want to be a doctor or a lawyer or an engineer or a tradie necessarily, but they want to do something creative in the social media space or something like that.
Exactly.
And I think that's where it needs to go, because the fact is there are so many avenues to work and make money and live a different lifestyle now, that if you know how to do it and you're willing to still dedicate yourself to it, you can make a different life for yourself. But anytime that's deviating from the traditional path, it's going to make people uncomfortable in the beginning, because, well, parents and other people who haven't seen that done before are going to be worried that that's not a real thing and you're not going to make it. But I think over time, we're starting to show kids that there is another way, as long as they still apply themselves and they find some purpose.
100%.
They can still help other people in some way.
You're putting the nail on the head, man, because for me, COVID has shown that a lot, because kids or parents, right, they actually have to help their kids learn too at home, or guardians, whatever the situation may be. So they got to see how difficult it is for teachers to teach their kids. And then they're starting to see a different perspective, and now they're hearing it. But then the kids that actually do flourish, as I have my perspective that ADHD is an environmental condition. You put a kid that might not flourish in the classroom, but he's at home allowed to do his little things, explore, go do his little escapes to make himself feel good. He may have done better during COVID lockdown. You know what I mean? It's a double-edged sword. It was good and bad, but ultimately it made people realize that there's not a single approach for everything, and we can't have this single-minded approach. And that's with my ADHD. that's what they've had in the past in society is that ADHD. But I loved hearing that about your school and the work that you've done, because in 10, 15 years, that's the exciting part. All those kids that got those opportunities are going to be creating amazing things. They're going to be doing crazy stuff. And then the action and the work speaks for itself, and the studies and the science, like the society that we used to live in can literally, but they can't say anything anymore because these people have actually been allowed to explore their true strengths and find who they are and work with those. And so, I mean, I love that stuff. I love hearing that because we're moving to a really cool world. I know there's a lot of negativity in the world and society at the moment, but there's also a flip side where we're moving forward, and that's cool. We've got to try and stay positive as best as we can. Like, can't dismiss the shit that's going on, but also look at the cool shit that's happening too.
Absolutely, man. It's an amazing time to be alive. Like, I'm so glad I'm alive at this time. Obviously, because like me being a podcaster wouldn't have been much use at any other time. But
genuinely, like, this stuff's perfect time for you, my man.
Yeah, exactly. But this sort of thing, like, there's just so many opportunities these days for young people to go and do something that's never been done before, and then show everyone that is legitimate. And then, of course, the system as a whole will start to follow slowly over a number of years once there's proof that, okay, there are more ways to skin a cat than just the traditional means. So yeah, I think it's an amazing time to be alive and be able to explore so many opportunities. And as an entrepreneur or someone who's got an idea and wants to make something happen, if you can think of something and you can find some basic equipment and talk to some people about it, like, you can get onto it and start making something happen, even if it's something that other people would tell you, like, oh, you can't do that, or that's not a thing. You can actually make it into one, which is pretty
100%.
amazing. Like, obviously you've done that yourself. So when you were living with your brother, what was that like? Because he was 21, he's obviously in that like partying stage of his life with older friends and that. And I'm guessing, like, were you brought into that? Was he like that?
Because it was such a big age gap, it was a little bit hard to, I mean, I did hang out with his friends and I'm very grateful. Like, a lot of his friends helped me out and I'm very grateful for them, because there's a few that I will repay one day too for some things that they've done for me in my past. I never forget things. So there was that, but I was lucky because I just didn't have one brother. I was fortunate to have a few older brothers too. Like, that weren't actually but you know what I mean? So, but then there was that freedom too. So my brother was 21. He has his own life to live and he's trying to understand himself. He also lost his mum. He's also moving out of his family home, and him and my dad clashed a lot more than I did, probably a bit because he was a bit older. He understood it a little bit more. So that gave me the freedom to sort of do what I wanted when I wanted. So I could not go to school, because why would you go to school if I'm tired from working and I'm going to go to school and learn about math? I'm like, what's the point, man? I need to learn how to pay my bills. I need to learn how to budget instead of. So for me, I prioritize my work because at the end of the day, I needed to pay rent. I needed to pay bills.
How long did you stay in school for?
No, I finished year 12.
Oh, really? Wow.
Yeah, not very with the best marks. I'll be honest, I don't really know how I did pass.
What kept you in it? Like, what kept you in school through that whole time?
Honestly, I think it was the structure or something getting me there. Or my mum. Honestly, my mum loved the schools that I went to because she put my brother through there. And before my mum passed away, I got an early acceptance letter just for my mum, just as a gift to my mum before she passed away. So I knew my mum wanted me to go to the school. And I'm not a very religious person, but my mum did love Mary McKillop, who is the Maris brothers culture and the schooling system. So yeah, I think for me, it was my mum that kept me in there, very honestly. Like I said, I struggled going to church. And now I'm very spiritual and I believe there's something up there. I'm not against religion, but it's just been interpreted differently. I won't go into that.
But it's part of your way to honor your mum.
Definitely, 100%. Everything I do is for my parents, man. I just want to make my mum and dad proud. That's all I am. I'm just a kid just a bloke trying to make his parents proud. And
oh man, I'm sure you have.
I hope so, man. Yeah.
Oh, no doubt. How did ADHD affect you through your whole schooling life?
Honestly, like, I didn't realize how much it impacted me until a couple of years ago when I was like, fuck, I got away with a lot of shit. My ADHD got sort of put to the side because I'd lost my mom and I'd moved out of home. So my behaviors that is normally associated with people with ADHD was just, oh no, it's because he's lost his mom. So no one ever actually addressed it to me in high school. I knew I was diagnosed as a young kid, so I always knew that I had it. And my mum never really she didn't medicate me. My brother was medicated for a little bit, but she just did a different approach. And I think I look back now at my primary school and the environment that I was in. There was a reason why my mum sent me to that primary school, because it was a cool bush area, mad area to learn. The environment was just really unique in nature. So then I'll fast forward, to where we are now. I wanted to learn about it because I started to see, hang on a second, like people are talking about ADHD, that it's a negative thing, but all I've understood that like Thomas Edison had ADHD, Albert Einstein had ADHD, it started to piss me off. So I'm like, hang on a second, I've got to this point in my life and now I'm looking at myself like, you got to tell me I've got a deficiency and a disorder. And I was like, all right. So I went through the process. Last year, I got in my journal there. I was like, all right, I'm going to explore. No, 2 years ago, I'm going to explore my ADHD. Went on some medication for a bit. Didn't feel myself on it. Trialed it for a while. Like I felt like I needed it at times. I didn't like that. I didn't want to be needing something to make me function. Then I read this book. It's called The Hunter in a Farmer's World. And it's by Tom Hartman. I don't know if I'm saying it correctly. Changed my perspective on ADHD. It's talking about how ADHD was actually, we're just living out of our environment, right? You look at hunters 1,000 years ago, distractibility was needed 1,000 years ago, because that could have meant whether or not you ate for your tribe or you hunted or got killed. Yeah. See, so I'm not trying to say that farmers, which people without ADHD are bad or anything. They complement each other. We're needed for both one another. So for me, it's just we're living out of our environment now. So you look at fighters, for me, like I look at a lot of fighters, top fighters, they're very creative, charismatic. ADHD has a very common theme with all these people. We're creative, we're empathetic. We never talk about the positives. We're always focused on the negatives, but that's because they've judged us through one systematic, like I said earlier, for society. So for me, ADHD is a made up thing, genuinely, because how ADHD is, why they've made it. Sorry if I'm going on a bit of a rant here, man. I'm very passionate about this.
That's right.
But ADHD was made so people could find a reason to fix something, right? We need a label, which is fine to work towards. But the reason that ADHD is a thing now, it's medicalized, then they can make money through medication. Yeah. And I'm not trying to say medication's not good for everyone. There is a place for it in certain workplaces or the type of job that you do in certain environments, but that's your decision to work in that environment. If you choose a job that's in an environment that works with your ADHD, you won't need medication personally. But and science has shown that there's studies that they've got that show why medication works is based off very minimal evidence. And that's the cool thing now, why I talk about it openly, because all you have to do is a bit of research yourselves and realize that they actually don't even know what they're talking about with ADHD. And that's the cool thing. That's why I'm so passionate about what I'm talking about, what I'm doing now, is because I feel like I'm onto something here. Me understanding my emotions, going through my journey of understanding myself and understanding my love for myself. That's what drives ADHD. That's what drives me, is self-love and loving other people. And then,
So how have you been able to utilize that condition and make it work for you in your life and use it, to your advantage, if anything?
Where did I start? I was able to lose like 33 kilos. I was able to fight in Muay Thai. I've done a lot of different jobs. For me, I public speak, and that's what I'm allowed, the energy. That's the biggest part of it. Public speaking isn't easy. I've been speaking and sharing in schools for a while now. Just sharing my story, trying to inspire kids, to empower them to talk about their mental health in case they are struggling. Because I felt there, I never want any kid to feel alone. I never want anyone to feel how I felt. And by me sharing my story, if I can change one life, then I'm a happy person. So for me, that's how I use my energy with my ADHD. It's nerve-wracking talking and getting in front of a group and sharing a story and being vulnerable with these people. But for me, I know the impact that it could have on one person, and that's where the confidence comes from. And that's where my ADHD allows me to just get that bit of energy, to get that bit more charisma up in stage, or to try and, just to be a bit more powerful when I talk. So just working with it, man.
Because you say you view it as a superpower rather than a hindrance.
Oh, hands down, man. It's my superpower, bro. Straight out. I love it. And that's what I do with the ADHD Kid Academy, is I'm going to show kids, and I am showing kids and adults how to understand their superpower.
Cool, man. Yeah, that's awesome. And it's not a story you hear ever, really. You don't hear anything about ADHD from people who have it. And it's kind of stereotypically just that kid that can't sit down who gets some Ritalin chucked at him, and then that's the end of the story. And we don't really know much about that. So it's a very interesting way to put it. And it's great that you're out there talking about it like that.
If you were to look up ADHD now, right, just this last little thing, then what the symptoms of ADHD, they're all behaviors of people or things. But what is a behavior? A behavior is an expression of an emotion. So that's like, well, okay, if I understand my emotions, I can understand my behaviors. Then my behaviors dismiss every single symptom that ADHD has, but I still have this thing that you so call the disorder or deficiency. Does that make sense? Yeah, so I don't know if that made sense.
Well, so you're saying it comes down to having a handle on your emotions, because that's going to then dictate your behaviors. So do you feel like the more you've been able to understand and watch yourself on an emotional level, the more you've been able to control your ADHD?
100%. I've been able to create my own business out of it. The past 2 years, the amount of things that I've been able to do in terms of my speaking, just working on myself individually and just trying to grow as a person and allowing and learning just as a person is, accepting myself, because I thought I couldn't learn because society's perception of what ADHD was or is. So for many years, I thought I was stupid. I thought I was dumb. I thought I was lazy, but I wasn't. I just wasn't doing the things that I enjoyed. Give me a purpose behind the reason and I'll do it 110% better than anyone else. And that's the cool thing about it. You ask anyone with ADHD, the things that they enjoy, they've got a purpose behind it. They are incredible at what they do. Yeah. And that's the cool thing. The more and more people I talk to with ADHD, they share that with me because I'm so open about it. And that's why I want to create an army. I know that people with ADHD are as passionate as I am, and they know that they're not disordered or deficient.
It's going to be a high energy army, bro.
That's it, straight out it will be. And there'll probably be some fighters too, because there's a lot of fighters that have ADHD as well. And that's the cool thing, because that's where we're hunters. We're trying to feel like we did 1,000 years ago.
Do you think that's because that requires that 100% level of focus?
110%. 110%. And you look at the best fighters in the world, though. Israel Adesanya, for one example, who won yesterday. We won't go into that. But he understands himself on an emotional level. The guy talks about his emotions. He meditates. That's what separates him from the others. I guarantee. I mean, he's an incredible athlete physically, but you look at his mental game, he's above the rest. So that's why, and that's personally why he's my favorite, just because of the way that he talks and the way he conducts himself and who he is as a person.
So you seem to be saying that kids who might be diagnosed with ADHD, it's not necessarily that they can't learn or they have a deficiency. It's just that they haven't found the thing to focus on that they need to find. And if they find that thing, which obviously takes longer, or they find something they truly enjoy that they're passionate about, then they're going to be potentially brilliant at doing that thing and being able to focus.
Yes, to a degree. There's also a lot of other components too. So it's an environmental and emotional. So for me, when it comes to the emotional aspect, understanding your emotions, but your environment also impacts how your emotions feel too. Yeah. And that, for me, the driver of ADHD is love and feeling that self-love. So as a kid, my mum was the most loving person, and I'm glad that I'm able to project that now. I like to feel like I'm a kind individual, and I give a lot of love out. And for me, when I started to love myself more and more, that's when it was easier to do things, and my ADHD was better. And then I look back and I was like, we look at relationships, and unfortunately ADHD impacts relationships a lot, but it's because we allow and not understanding it. And that's when I started to understand how my ADHD was impacting my own self and my self-love. So for me, it was and that's why with anxiety and depression is one of the biggest things. You don't love yourself. Yeah. So I'm going around here, man. Yeah. That's
good, man. You said a lot of great stuff in there. That was really interesting. So I know there was a period of time where when you were still there was a period of time when you were a young man where you got pulled in with the wrong crowd a bit and turned to drugs for a while. Like, what led you into that? And then what got you out of that?
Yeah. So when I was around 18, I started working in Bankstown. Some interesting characters. You learn a lot of positive and unfortunate hard lessons there. So you're around boys that have got Rolexes, nice cars, going out the weekends, clubbing, partying. You think that's the lifestyle, that materialistic things, that's what you want. And for me, it was like, oh, well, these guys that seem happy and they've got cash, they've got all these bundles of cash, they must. So for me, that's all right, sweet. I must, if I make money, I'll be happy. So then obviously you started partying, and I tried to live that lifestyle, but I wasn't me. I just could never do it. I was too nice. And genuinely, man, I was just got myself in debt, and I just was too generous at times. And and that's how I learned. And for me, I look at that as school fees. I feel like that my debt that I invested in that as school fees is way more valuable than any school fees that I paid actually. You know what I mean?
Great lessons.
Yeah.
Did that get ugly at any stage?
Yeah, I won't go into certain things that happened and I saw in friends that aren't here. And like, so I did that, and that's sort of ultimately what got me out of it. I realized that they were impacting me negatively. As much as I had learned a lot, and that lifestyle wasn't what I wanted to be like. I knew that there was something more to life. And then my anxiety and depression wasn't going anywhere, and that was impacting it quite a lot. I needed to take myself out of that environment. And that's when I did move. But the thing is, I did leave that environment, but it was still hard. It didn't change everything, but it did improve myself because I was around a bit more positive people. But yeah, it did get bad at times.
And what did Muay Thai do for you?
Changed my life, man. It gave me an outlet to express my emotions in a positive way. I'm not a violent person. I'm not a violent person at all. But for me, fighting just does it. It lets me express my emotions in a real positive outlet, in a controlled space too. And it's a very spiritual sport too. As you would know, it's very humbling. It's very cultured. It's very unique in its art. And it's a very beautiful sport.
Yeah, there's nothing more humbling than getting kicked in the head as well.
Genuinely by a person that size. And yeah, and they're such friendly people. And that's what I love the sport. It's you kick them in the head and then they'll shake your hand afterwards and go have a beer with you. So
yeah, well, I've noticed that as well. The guys at my gym are extremely friendly, and even I've done Krav Maga as well. And again, like extremely friendly people. I think those who have that level of discipline and have trained in that way, if you had no idea about martial arts or self-defense, you might expect them to be aggressive dickheads, but they're actually the most humble, nicest people ever, probably because they know that they could actually do some damage, then that allows people to relax and have respect for each other. And if you commit to training for an art for so long, I think it just, it gives you that sense of calm and makes you respectful and makes you want to be more peaceful. And I think after you train hard, you're peaceful as, like you're really like relaxed afterwards. You just like laughing and smiling. Even if you're angry before you went in there, like there's no way you train and you're still mad, I find.
You never, and yeah, you're 100% right. I mean, that it just allows you don't think about anything. And it's just, when you're there present, you're just there because you have to think. Pardon me, you have to be present.
Yeah, otherwise you're going to get rocked.
Exactly. But then the flip side of Muay Thai, and what I found is, and you just shared that too, like your guys in your gym, the Muay Thai culture, the sport, the gyms that you come across, fighters have cool stories, man. You got to be a little bit interesting to want to get kicked in the head for fun. You know what I mean? So that's what I love. You get to meet dudes and ask them why they're training, and they've always got a cool story, what got them there, or why they're fighting, or why they've chosen this sport.
Yeah.
So that's what I love too. The people that I've met through Muay Thai, the interesting people, lifelong friends. It's just, for me, it's going to be a part of my life for the rest of my life. And I just can't wait. I'm only new. I've only had one amateur fight. I'm still learning, and it's just a sport that I love, and I just love watching it. I love learning, and you've got to, for now that I'm allowed to learn, that the fact that I've learned, that I know I can learn, for me is like, wow, I've still got a whole life ahead of me. So it's exciting to see.
What have you taken out of Muay Thai that you've been able to apply to the rest of your life, or how has it flowed into the rest of your life?
The fight or flight response, truly. Like we talk about the flight or fight response. When you're in a fight, you fight or flight. You got to sit there and fight. So for me, if I can stand in that ring and understand myself and be not calm, but alert and control my emotions, that is going to allow me to control my emotions in other scenarios. And fighting in the ring, man, is nothing compared to the fight in the battle that you can have in your head. And I know, like I talk about Tyson Fury, and he talks about that. For me, the battle that I've had in my mind and the dark thoughts that I've had, the suicidal ideations and wanting to take your own life, is a very dark place. So getting into a ring and getting punched in the head, cool, like hit me as hard as you want, knock me out, but it's still not going to be as hard and dark as the battles that I've had to go through and overcome in my mind. So for me, it's like, that's what I love. It's I've been able to overcome something that nothing else will ever be as hard as. So.
And I guess part of it is like conquering yourself, right? Like conquering your fears and wanting to feel fearless to a degree by challenging yourself and taking yourself out of your comfort zone. And especially being a peaceful guy who doesn't have an inclination to violence, it's the furthest thing from what you'd be comfortable doing. But if you're able to keep going to the point where you do become comfortable, then you've reached this other level where you realize there are levels to you that you didn't know before, and then that can apply to other parts of life, because
100%.
then suddenly you're as one example, but you're now the guy who wants to go after something that's scary, but does the work anyway and keeps coming until you master it. And then if you apply that to other things in life, then the sky's the limit.
100%. And that is exactly right. That approach in even writing emails, or for me, coming from a background of not going to school, my literacy and writing skills, so going into a workforce where that's needed, I had to push myself. I had to continually, people laughed at me and made fun of my writing and be like, oh, you don't know how to spell and stuff like that. But for me, I sort of had to accept that, because I knew that I had to learn this and this. And the same thing with Muay Thai, like you just said, it's just, when no one's perfect and we all start from somewhere. And
that's right.
And
you can't grow if you're not prepared to look like a fool first.
Exactly right. 100%.
And I think that's what puts people off, especially if it's a hyper masculine environment like combat or something like that, as a man, because you'd rather not try and not have people see that you can't do it than try, look like a baby giraffe, and then feel shame and feel insecure about it. A lot of people would not even try, or would give up straight away. It takes courage to keep coming back and know that you suck at it, and be like, yeah, that's okay. It's okay to suck at stuff, because I'll get better. And that's actually, you have to face that. No matter what skill you're trying to learn, you're going to suck at it at the start. And your ability to be able to front up to that and become comfortable with the uncomfortable is what separates people from those who learn how to do things and those who stay the same.
The growth mindset or a fixed mindset, man, it's pretty, my boss actually told me that one. We can summarize people into two different categories. And I was like, yeah, it's not wrong. Like, I don't like to put people in categories, but it's true. You either want to learn or you don't want to learn, and you're not open to change and learning. So yeah, and I wasn't at times. Through my stages of life, I hated the world. I was angry. I blamed everyone else for my problems. This person was why I felt that way. That person's why I felt this way. And then once you learn that you can control your emotions, and once I learned I can control how I react to situations, those people can't make me feel certain ways. I can make myself feel certain ways, not them.
Yeah, and then that gives you the power.
Exactly.
I believe you were 23, and then you lost your dad to cancer as well.
Yeah, so my dad passed away from throat, mouth and lung cancer from smoking and drinking.
Yeah. And your relationship had been pretty rough for those years?
Yeah, so it was around my 21st birthday, like from when I moved out of home up until my 21st, it wasn't really great. I was seeing my dad here and there. I'd call him. I still love my dad. I mean, he was my dad, and I couldn't not. So, but when I was told he was sick, I did sort of put that behind me, and I did care for him quite a lot more. But unfortunately, my dad's mental health didn't go too well either during that period of him being sick. So I did have to try and support him through stages of him expressing quite a lot of suicidal ideations, and a lot of times where he's telling me that he was going to take his own life. And as a kid trying to support his dad, it was just a lot to deal with. And so when my dad did pass away, everything sort of hit rock bottom for me, because just so many emotions. And then I had a lot of anger still as well from the past that I hadn't dealt with.
Yeah.
And because I hadn't dealt with the anger, I was going through a process of my mum, the loss of my mum. So I was dealing with two losses of both my parents here, and so many mixed emotions of anger and a lot of trauma from my childhood, unfortunately.
Did it feel like you couldn't resolve it in a way because your mum was gone, your dad was gone, they were the objects of some of your resentment, a lot of your pain, and then some of your anger with your dad, and then it's like, well, once they're gone, like, what do I do with this?
100%. And my parents, the people that are meant to be guiding you through life, are gone too. So for me, it's like, shit, I feel like I haven't got the skills or the guidance to take on this world. So then that's when you feel isolated, you feel alone, you don't feel like you can speak out and get help for anyone, because it's such an isolating feeling. And at the time, men couldn't talk about their emotions. We couldn't talk about what was going on for us. We're told to toughen up, harden up. It's go for a beer. And that's when I did start going out partying. You start expressing these emotions in negative ways. And yeah, it was tough. It was a really tough time.
At that time, did you feel like, for whatever reason, you weren't meant to make it, and things just didn't pan out how they were supposed to for you, and that was beyond your control, and that was just too bad? Is that sort of how you viewed things? Yeah,
man, I always thought I was just cursed. I thought I had bad luck. Nothing ever good happened. And whenever I used to say that, it didn't. And then that's when I started to realize that, like, manifestation, it does. tell the thing's going to go shit. You say this is negative, you be negative, you consistently blame others. It isn't going to get easier. I'm not saying it's easy to get out of that, but
it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. Whatever the story is that you tell yourself will become true, because like you said, with emotions guiding behaviors, your thoughts also guide your actions as well. So if you start to convince yourself of a particular narrative, then that's going to manifest over time, which can be very hard to realize that you are somewhat in control of that anyway, to be able to break yourself out of that. But it led you to a point where you were suicidal. You had a plan to actually take your own life. And I know you messaged your brother at a crucial time. What did that message say?
She said goodbye. I was saying goodbye to my brother, and I knew my brother wouldn't be awake. It was 3 a.m. Yeah, it was 3 a.m. in the morning. And he called me. I was shocked. And for me, it was like, he must have been on his phone, because it was one of those, you send a message and he called straight away. And I was like, shit. I was like, fuck, okay, my brother's calling me here. Then maybe that's a sign from my mum, my dad. I don't know. And at my hardest times, when I was planning to take my own life, like, you do look for a sign, or you think, is this like, it's because you don't want to, and you don't really want to take your own life, but you don't feel like there's anywhere else. There's no hope. So for me to get like a glimmer, even like the smallest sign at that time, because that my parents were there guiding me, was like, oh, I took that, and then that's what I grabbed. And I just was like, you know what, I'm going to do this. Maybe it happened for a reason. Maybe there's a reason behind this. I had to go through this shit so other people didn't, and other people don't have to go through it in the future. Maybe it's like, all right, I've got to go through this now so I can help others that are just like me. And then that's what's got me to where I am now. That's what's motivated me to this day, is just to really not want anyone to ever feel what I felt. And unfortunately, it does happen. And still, statistically, men do take their own life, and the highest rate of death is in young people in Australia, is suicide.
What did your brother say to you when he called you?
It was just more just like, go to my cousin's house. It was a 3 a.m. thing. It was more go to the hospital, go to my cousin's. I wasn't too keen on going to hospital at that stage, but then I did end up voluntarily going to hospital. I ended up sleeping outside my cousin's house that morning, actually, because she has some kids and I didn't want to wake them up. And in the moment of me wanting to take my own life, I still had that, I don't know, like, I didn't want to impact my cousins at that time. So I slept outside in the freezing cold on a little chair. And then I did voluntarily decide to go into hospital. Like, my cousin spoke with me and she decided, and she helped me massively through that process. It was that non-judgmental and asking me what I needed. And a lot of people that are there for you during times that love you, they do want to help, but they tell you out of a place of love, but they're not actually listening to you and hearing out what you need. And that's what is understood for me now, why I was able to overcome it, was people started to listen to what I need, not what doctors told me that I needed. I didn't have the best experience in hospital. I didn't go to a place that I needed, or not needed, but I shouldn't have been there, but I actually got a lot out of it anyhow. But just so the system, I'm fortunate I've been able to change the system to myself, being involved in some research projects in emergency departments with the Black Dog Institute. So it's been an interesting thing. Going through my experience in ED, I hated it, but I needed it. But I didn't want others to go through that. And I felt like there's other avenues that people can go through when they are expressing suicidal thoughts or ideations, because unfortunately the system is broken in many ways, and it's shown that. And for me, that was something that I wanted to do and change, and I got the opportunity to do so. So there's a new system at Mind Gardens that's opening up at St. Vincent's Hospital in Sydney. It's an alternative to ED. So the way that people attend the emergency department is a little bit more friendlier, more approachable, more catered towards why you're there, and listening to what brought you in, not how did you try and take your own life, and eliminating that risk, which is a priority, don't get me wrong. But why is that person coming in? Like, why are they trying to take their own life? Let's address the reasons.
So it's like a perspective where there's more care for the individual rather than just the black and white, making you feel almost like a liability.
Exactly right. It is. And then you're quite judged in the system, unfortunately. Mental health it's taking time for people to understand and come around to. So there is that stigma that has come through the system too as well, unfortunately.
And I hear the same thing from men every single time we talk about suicide and what's helped people at that point. Everyone has said that it was those who were able to just hold space with them and listen without judgment, and not try to tell them what to do straight away, like make sure that they felt as though they were actually there for them, and then start having some conversations and perhaps like, well, just asking that person what they need from them, how they can help. And number one, letting that person know that they care for them and they are heard and they can be seen is like the most important starting point for that, because it's also very confronting for whoever is on the receiving end of that to try and say the right thing or know what to do in that scenario. 100%. And just reaffirming that point that, first of all, listening and getting the message across that you love that person and you care about them. That's like, if you can do that, you've done pretty well.
100%. And working at volunteering at Feel the Magic and helping the kids through that have lost parents, that's what it showed me. Was I'm not there to change this kid's life. I'm just there to support him and guide him and know that he's not alone. And that's all we need. When we're at our darkest times, we feel alone. And I was fortunate that I had a mate at a time of my darkest times that he shared, pardon me, that's something that helped me over those periods of time, just to know that someone cares. And that's all it is. And sometimes takes it to know that someone genuinely loves you and that we want to feel loved. And that's all I can say. If anyone is there, like trying to think everyone's to take their own life, think there is people that care. I fucking care. Like, you know what I mean? You would rather hear someone's story than attend their funeral. So yeah, man, absolutely. How did things improve from that point? Like, how did you pull yourself out of that low point, other than obviously the support that you had from people who did the right thing? But how do you do it yourself, and what kind of thoughts were you able to replace in your head that took you to a better place? Just accepting that I wasn't to blame for some of the things that I had done, or not done that I was a bad person, but the things that I'd learned, I had to unlearn certain behaviors, because where I was taught things, you get guided by the wrong. I never really had a positive role model in my life. So I started to be kinder to myself and be like, oh, hang on, Ryan, like you didn't have the opportunities to learn this stuff. So if you give yourself the chance to learn this, then you can work towards it. So for me, going to Feel the Magic, that's where I started to understand my grief, understand into my journey. And then that's what put me into working in the suicide prevention house, because I really enjoyed supporting these kids. And I was just like, and I felt that I had something to share here, and these kids were relating to me and connecting me with quite a lot, because I was so open with these kids, and vulnerability creates connection. And I was like, well, hang on, I really enjoyed this. It was tough, but it was fun, and maybe I can do more from this. So then I started working with adults in the suicide prevention recovery center, and you learn from others. So for me, like when you asked me that, how did I learn? It was just, you learn from people, man. Like I just love talking. I love meeting people. I love seeing how they've done what they've done. And it's like, oh, okay. Because everyone's got their own unique life. We can't tell others how they feel or should do things. But as long as we're doing things that make us feel good and aren't harming anyone else. But
it's only when you have that willingness to share, or at least to open up and listen, that you can hear those other stories. Because
100%.
Before then, if you lock everything else out and just isolate yourself with your own demons, then you think it's just you going through that. And if anything, you have shame over it, and certainly pain, and you don't allow yourself to realize that there's a lot of other people in the same boat, because you're not even conscious of that being a possibility. You're so overwhelmed. And it's once you let that in and realize that you're human, as are many others, and that so many people that have come before you have gone through something very similar, and a lot of them have found a way out of it, that you can yourself, and then you can repay the favor as you are doing now. And you're a classic example of purpose from pain, where you've gone through something that would have broken most people, but you've been able to harness it and now turn it into something that delivers true meaning to you in your life. Not that you have to do that if you've been through something like you have, but in many cases, people do find a way to use that to be of service and to help others not feel like they felt, because, well, it's the most significant thing that you've ever experienced.
100%. And that's the thing. It's everyone's going to experience adversity in their life. And I just experienced mine younger, and I never wanted to be like, oh, look at me, I'm going through shit. I never want to be a victim of my circumstances. And everyone else will have adversity. It's just, we don't blame ourselves for we don't have to blame ourselves for our past, but we are accountable for our future. I mean, obviously circumstances are different each person, but if you can learn the skills and tools and understand and just be a kind individual, make right decisions each day, life is easy. I know it's a very simple recipe and understanding it, but us through COVID, it just showed like connection is what is key. And that's what Feel the Magic's taught me, man. And that's, I love working at this place, is connecting with other people is what gets us through and what creates magic, genuinely, man. And that's what the ADHD Academy, I mean, it is me creating it, but I have such amazing support people that I know that believe in me, that have given me the confidence to create this. And that's all I'm trying to show, and why I do what I do now. It's just, I'll be as open as possible. I don't really give a shit if it helps someone. It's just, yeah. I know I go on a rant, man. This is my ADHD, and I'm not, this is just me, bro. I'm not going to change who I am.
No, anyway, don't change, man. Don't change. Yeah. We love it. So how do you view the world now and your place in it?
Oh, that's an interesting question. You've got me there. Where do I view my place in this world? I'm just found my purpose. I just want to make a difference in someone's life, make people smile, make people happy, make people, just help people, man. Like, it feels good. I want to help others, and just want to, I don't want to have some cool shit. I want to have fun. I want to enjoy life too.
Yeah, I think you got to have a bit of fun too, man. You know,
100%.
Because it's pretty heavy stuff. I think like that's a lot of where you find the purpose is in that difficulty, and that might just be where you have to go for it. But yeah, you gotta enjoy it too, man. You gotta like blow off some steam. But then I think like the Muay Thai is great for that, and you've obviously discovered that old adage of discipline equals freedom. Which you've been able to apply to your life as well, and Muay Thai is also an example for life in terms of, you know, facing adversity and that discipline, and then applying it and knowing that adversity is part of life, and it's not like you had one test and you got over it and then that was it and you can tell everyone about how you got over it. It's about preparing yourself as much as possible for stuff that you can't control that will come into your life, and that's inevitable. And it's not something that we should fear, but it's something that we should prepare for. And then in the meantime, we should be helping each other to get through it, because we're much stronger together.
100%. And on my program, I facilitated online because I'm in isolation. I couldn't be at the camp in person. I tell them that, like, I'm going to experience grief and loss again. I'm going to experience tough times, but going through my grief and loss journey, equip me with a tool belt. I'm talking to kids, that's why I use tool belt, or like Batman's belt. And Batman's belt has multiple different things, and working through your mental health and each day supporting yourself isn't just seeing a psychologist. It's eating healthy, going to the gym, looking after yourself, connecting with friends. And that's multiple different things to put on your tool belt. Yeah. And that's what people think it's an easy fix. Or I do this one thing right, everything should be like amazing. No, it takes work, and it takes work consistently. And some people are willing to do it and some people aren't. And yeah.
That's a good analogy, man. I like that. I like the tool belt because it's so true. It's just about preparing and equipping yourself to be able to face the challenges that are going to come your way. And it's not like you cure your mental health or you just get over whatever it is that you're living with. It's like, you know, you live with it and you make life as good as it can be anyway.
Exactly.
Why are you grateful to be alive?
Too many amazing opportunities in life. My mum and dad put me on this earth for a reason. I'm here for a purpose. I'm grateful for so many things that have come my way, my dog, everything. Every opportunity that happens each day. I'm just grateful for my health, everything.
So much of what you're saying is an interesting perspective I haven't heard before, especially the ADHD stuff, not something that's discussed. And so great to hear you talk about it. And I love any time someone's speaking with that sort of level of enthusiasm. Yeah, it was really good. I know it's a good episode because I love doing it, and I feel like I would just want to be mates with you anyway, so then it's good.
I appreciate that, bro. Legend. Thanks for that, man.
That's it for this episode. If you're getting some value out of the show, please help us out with a quick rate and review on Apple Podcasts. Everything we do is recorded in video, so follow Youngblood Men's Mental Health on Instagram and Facebook, and Youngblood Mental Health on TikTok. Subscribe to our YouTube channel, Youngblood Media, and please leave us a comment or send us a message if these stories resonate. We'd love to hear from you. And most importantly, please share the podcast with anyone in your life who might need it. We're all about reaching as many people as we can. This is Youngblood. Thanks for being part of the mission. Catch you next time.